Welcome to the best works of emerging explicit romance authors.
Our curators select a wide variety of tales about the lifelong human quest
for satisfying, lasting, and meaningful expressions of sexual health. Steamy Stories daily podcast focuses primarily on short stories.
Explicit Novels Daily Podcast presents longer format novels over a span of episodes.
Subscribe to both Steamy Stories and Explicit Novels in your favorite podcasting app.
And now, today's story.
Runways, Part 1. Flying a supermodel isn't all it appears to be. By M. Storyman X, listen to the podcast at Steamy Stories. I had to find something to do when I got out of the military. Something that I loved, something that I wouldn't mind doing while I collected my military pension at age 40. Yeah, I know, retired at such a young age. But the military game is a young man's game, and even with over 7,000 flying hours, youth still trumps experience in the flying game. As you get older, your body just can't respond like it used to. As a result, I just couldn't keep taking those high G maneuvers. I convinced the bank that I was a good risk, purchased myself a used Beach King Air 200 turboprop, and set myself up as an executive charter service. Life was good. Business was thin. On more than one occasion, I ended up sleeping in my own airplane rather than getting a hotel room, just to try and save some money. It's not easy to pay for a $750,000 aircraft, fuel, maintenance, and living expenses. To be quite honest, I was about to drown under that debt. Welcome, Amy. Amy called because of one of my business cards I'd left in so many airports. Amy was the executive secretary to a somewhat famous fashion model. In her own words, she was a glorified babysitter, helping Kimberly manage her multi-million-dollar business of runway modeling and lingerie line and endorsements. Her current problem was that Kim had suddenly become afraid to fly commercial following a spate of terrorist attacks against aircraft. Her question was a simple one. Would I be interested in contracting to handle flying her around the country? Could I deal with airport runways so she could focus on helping Kim dominate the fashion garment runways? At that point, I would have contracted to fly Beelzebub himself if the price were right. Little did I know that 6 months down the road, I'd feel as if that was exactly who I was flying. Kim was gorgeous. Of course she was. She was a supermodel. At 30, she was on the long side of it, but then some continued to work well into their 50s, with the right skincare and constant workouts and such. Kim flitted from city to city, rarely spending more than 2 or 3 days in any one place. She had a beautiful 20,000 square foot home, which she seemed to rarely be in. She could walk the walk and talk the talk and sell sexy little lingerie like she was selling snow to Eskimos. Unfortunately, her looks is where nice stopped. She'd started to believe her own hype. She'd started to think of herself as a diva and act as if those of us around her were beneath her. More than once her sweet lilting voice snarled from the passenger cabin that I was flying too rough, or making the plane bounce too much for her to sleep. As if I had any control over the air currents. Amy was the constant. She was always there, inserting herself between Kim and whoever might possibly be around her. She soothed Kim and kept her empire on an even keel. But while the pace seemed relentless to me, Kim seemed to just eat it up. She loved the challenge as much as I loved flying. I suppose if I hadn't gone out on a limb after 3 months and updated my plane from a 1980s vintage to a reasonably new 2002, I might have even quit the contract. But with that new payment to cover, the last thing I wanted to do was kill the cash cow. I'd asked Kim more than once for a date, and always gotten the same answer: we can fuck or we can work together. Which do you prefer? X-Ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7, rolling. I radioed the tower as I applied the throttle and sent the Air King accelerating down the runway. This was going to be a relatively short trip. Kim had some kind of a photo shoot in the middle of Missouri, at some lake called the Ozarks, out in the middle of nowhere. All I knew was it looked like a winding snake on the map and had one small airport close to where the shoot was that had just enough runway to sneak in if I went in light. In only a few short minutes, we were climbing through 10,000 feet, winging our way from Chicago over the Midwestern landscape at nearly 300 miles an hour. Adam. I heard Amy call urgently from the passenger cabin. Yeah? I called over my shoulder. Kim. She passed out. I can't seem to wake her. She called, panic clearly etched in her voice. Is she breathing? I called back. Yes, but it's very shallow and I can't seem to wake her. Okay. Check her eyes. Lift her eyelids and see if they respond. They seem to, but she still isn't waking up. Okay. Let me see where we can put down. I called back to her. Chicago Center. This is X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. Declaring a medical emergency. Roger, X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. State your situation. The controller radioed back. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. We have a passenger that is passed out. She is breathing at this time, but otherwise unresponsive. Requesting a vector to the nearest airport with medical close by. Roger that, X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. Hold 1. The controller said before pausing for a few moments. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7 turn 240. You are cleared to 5000 direct. St. Louis should be 50 miles. Contact St. Louis approach on 132.125. Have a good day. Thank you, Chicago. I answered before changing the radio and starting a descent toward St. Louis. The descent and landing were as normal as they could be, touching down less than 20 minutes after making the initial call. I taxied to the executive terminal and shut down, the ambulance quickly coming to the side of the plane as my turboprops spun slowly down to a stop. As much as I disliked Kim, I was concerned for her well-being. Clearly Amy was as well, and I did my best to comfort her on the taxi ride to the hospital. By the time we got there, Kim was awake and back to her normal bitch's self, though the doctors and nurses seemed to be flitting in and out with uncommon frequency. 24 hours later, and who knows how many tests, she was ready to be released. Now look. All I can do is warn you, the doctor said with a stern look on his face. You were lucky. You can't treat your body this way. My prescription is 2 weeks away, at least. No stress. You need to find some place to relax and decompress. No fucking way. I have too much to do. Kim argued. The doctor turned to Amy and shook his head. If you can't get her to take it easy a while, she's going to be right back here again. And next time she may leave toes up. He said emphatically before turning back to Kim again. I mean it. No phone, no computer, no stress of any kind. Your blood pressure was through the roof and you're just damn lucky it wasn't a stroke. Find a way to do it. And find a way to do it frequently, or you're going to be leaving us all too soon. I'll make sure she does. Amy said, giving Kim a stern look. Thank you, doctor. You're welcome, young lady. I hope she listens to you better than she's listening to me. He said as he looked over and saw Kim texting on her phone again. She will. If I have to tie her up and drag her off. Amy said sternly to Kim. Good luck with that, he said, shaking his head as he walked away. Come on. Amy said, leading Kim from the hospital room. It was little more than 2 hours and we were back at the airport, the turbines warmed up and taxiing for takeoff. The plane practically leapt off the tarmac and into the air as we headed back to Chicago, soaring into the air. You know. I don't know how you're going to get her to have any time away, I said to Amy as she sat in the right-hand seat, Kim sitting in the back alone, still angry with the doctor's orders. Yeah. I know. She can be difficult, Amy agreed. Glad I'm not going to have to deal with her, I said, shaking my head. No? Oh. That's right. You're going away for a couple weeks, Amy said, nodding as she remembered that next week started my promised vacation. Where are you going again? A little mountain lake in Colorado, I said with a smile. Just me and some really good fishing. Sit back, catch a few trout, watch the sun set on the mountainside looking over the valley below. It can't get more idyllic than that. I said with a sigh. Sounds like a perfect getaway," Amy said, leaning back and looking at the cockpit ceiling. "No phone, no demands on your time, just relaxation for 2 weeks? God, I envy you," she said with a sigh. "Could have been yours too," I said with a grin, reminding her that I had invited her to come along, only to get the typical answer. I made one last pitch. "The bed is big enough for 2, though it would be a bit cozy." "Yeah. I think we covered that one," she said with a smile. "Though it does sound tempting." "Can't say I didn't try," I answered her with a shrug. "So how do we get Kim to go on a vacation like that?" "Not my problem," I said with a smirk. "I lined this up months ago. You know how hard it is to find a place like this? Isolated? No phone, no modern utilities, nothing? Yeah, it has to be tough," Amy said as she looked out the window at the ground far below. "Hey. I know. Take Kim." "What? Are you nuts?" I said in surprise. First off, her idea of roughing it is not having her manicure on time. Can you imagine her out in the boonies without even a flush toilet? Oh Lord. That would be something to see, Amy said with a laugh. Yeah. She'd go nuts in half a day, I said with a shake of my head. So, how much does this little vacation cost you? Oh, fuel, food, cabin, and all? About $1,700 or $1,800. It'd be less if I didn't fly this gas hog there, but the only real way there is by plane or a long drive up from Denver. That's not too much. I'll pay you, Amy said quietly. Pay me for what? To take Kim, Amy said, still looking out the window. No way. It's my vacation. I don't want a baby-sit a prima donna. I almost snapped. Be ashamed to have to find someone else to fly us around while you're gone. Never know, she might like the new pilot better, she said softly. You trying to blackmail me? I asked in surprise. Oh, I wouldn't call it that, she said, turning to look at me, a crooked little grin on her face. Just think of it as job security. Think of it as one fucked vacation, I said hotly, staring out the front at the open sky. It's only a one-room cabin. Kitchen, bedroom, living room, all the same room. And only one bed. Where will she sleep? You're adults. You can share the bed, right? Remember me saying it was really cozy for the two of us friends? Yeah. So it can be cozy for you two too. It'll give you a chance to get to know her better. You're psycho, you know that? I said angrily. I'd planned this for months. I wanted to get away from the Ice Queen, not shack up with her. So how about it? I don't think you could pay me enough money to do that, I said, shaking my head. Okay. How about I sweeten the pot? I'll sleep with you for a whole weekend when you get back. I looked over at her incredulously. Did you just suggest that you prostitute yourself to convince me to take her with me? Seriously? Does seem a bit over the top, doesn't it? Yeah. I think you need to think about a new job if you're that wrapped around her, I said with a frown. Yeah, I want to go to bed with you, but not like that. She was silent for almost half an hour before she finally said anything more. I'm sorry. She confessed, I shouldn't have suggested that. But I will pay your expenses if you take her along. Send her off to a camp or something. That's what you do with children, right? She's not a child, Amy said testily. Though I have to admit, sometimes she acts like one. See? Okay. Seriously. Will you take her with you? It's my vacation. Away from her. I answered angrily. Adam. Seriously. What will it take for you to take her alone? You're not going to give up, are you? I observed her Tuna City. Nope. Shit. I swore quietly. Okay. I'll take her. On one condition. What's that? She asked, with a smile that said she had definitely won, again. She has to pull her weight. I'm not her servant. I'm not waiting on her, and I am most definitely not going to change what I planned on doing because she came alone. I don't care if she reads a book or plays solitaire or whatever. But if she turns into a pain in the ass, I'm throwing her in the lake. As long as you don't drown her, you have my permission to throw her in at your discretion, she said, practically beaming at my agreement. So what does she need to bring? Jeans, tees, flannel shirts, that kind of thing. I answered. I doubt she's even put a pair of jeans on in years, but I'll see what I can find. I'd still rather take you. I muttered. Maybe you can sometime, she said, surprising me again as she climbed from the seat and slipped back into the passenger cabin. I didn't hear most of the conversation, having to concentrate on talking with Approach and the tower as we got closer to landing. What I did hear wasn't particularly flattering. Cabin therapy. Saturday. 10 a.m. sharp. If she's not here, I'm leaving her behind, I said quietly to Amy as they got into the waiting car at the airport. Trust me. She'll be here with bells on, Amy said with a smile. No matter what she says right now. If you say so, I answered with a frown, not really wanting to think about how ruined my vacation had become. The hot August Saturday morning came, and at 5 minutes to 10, Kim's car arrived and did just that. Kim and Amy climbed from the back, Kim wearing a black miniskirt, a red halter top and 4-inch spike heels. Oh, this is going to be fun, I said to myself with a frown as Amy and Kim walked up. So, Kim, do you have something to tell Adam? Amy prompted. Kim rolled her eyes and bobbed her head side to side as she usually did when she had to do something because she was told to that she really didn't want to do. Yes. Adam. I'm supposed to do whatever you tell me. Do half the cooking and not mess up your vacation. I'm just on vacation along with you and you're not my servant, she said with a frown. And? Amy prompted. And if I become a pain in your ass, you have permission to throw me into the lake, she said with an irritated huff. Okay. Get on board, I told her as the driver of her car hauled the 2 big suitcases to the plane. I stowed them in the belly compartment and latched it down tight before climbing the stairs and pulling them up behind me. Kim rarely sat in the front with me, but was seated in the right seat as I crawled over the console into the left seat. It only took a few moments to get the turbines running and spun up, having already warmed them up after doing my ground check. I handed Kim a pair of headphones and put my own on as she adjusted them over her brown curls. So, is this going to be fun or are you just doing this because you're being paid? She asked across the electronic circuit. I'm going on vacation. You're tagging along, I answered before pressing the button. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7, ready to taxi. Roger. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. You are cleared to taxiway K to runway 16. Hold short and notify. Roger. Taxiway K, hold short and notify. I answered as I pushed the throttles and started the big plane moving forward. We bounced across the rough taxiway for almost 3 minutes before I could turn and stop in front of the runway. I stopped and did my throttle checks and verified that all my controls worked as required, and notified the tower. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7 holding at 16. Roger. X-ray Alpha Golf Foxtrot 7. You are cleared onto 16. You have a Gulf Stream coming in about 2 minutes behind you. Roger that. I'll be long gone, I answered as I eased the plane onto the 5,000-foot runway. I didn't even bother to stop as I pushed the throttles fully forward and spun the props up to speed, the plane quickly accelerating down the tarmac and easily lifting into the air with our light payload. And we're off, I said to Kim as we accelerated into the air, quickly climbing above the low-cloud deck and breaking into the sunshine above. So what makes this a vacation? Sounds like there isn't anything there, Kim said. There's a cabin. A boat. a lake and some incredible scenery. What more do you need? TV? Cell phones? Electricity? Hot water? There is electricity, as long as the sun is shining. And as far as hot water, there's a whole lake full. All you have to do is bring in a bucket and put it on the stove, I said with a chuckle. Oh joy! Don't start already. We have over 4 hours, I said to her as I set my GPS to Crested Butte Airport. So what do we do there? She asked after almost half an hour of silence. Fish, relax. You do know how to relax, right? Well, Amy packed me some books. So I guess I can read some. I suppose I can swim some too. Maybe. If you don't mind cold water. The lake is probably around 65 or so this time of year. Oh joy, she said with a frown. Don't worry. You can always just lay out on the dock and catch the sun, I told her. So, neighbors? Closest is about 5 or 6 miles away. This is a lake on top of a ski resort. This time of year, there's a skeleton crew on at the lodge, but that's about it. Well, sounds like a lot of fun, she said with a frown on her face. Remember what I said about that water temperature? Yeah. Don't make me throw you in as soon as we get there, because I will if I have to. Okay, she said with an obvious pout. So what do you talk about when you're not talking about work? I asked her. Well, clothes, nail polish colors, what we should wear to various things. You know, girl stuff. Girl stuff, huh? What do guys talk about? Fishing, hunting, sports, that kind of thing. How much can you talk about fishing? She asked curiously. A lot. How much can you talk about what to wear? A lot. How long did it take for you to pick that? What you're wearing? I don't know. Maybe half an hour. I see, I answered with a shake of my head. How long did it take for you to pick what you're wearing? She asked, looking at my t-shirt and cargo pocket shorts. About 30 seconds, I answered her. So, you do realize we're headed up a mountain? Aha! In a jeep. Okay. On a bouncy dirt road. So? She said with a shrug. Your point? Just wondering what made you think that was an appropriate outfit. I answered with a chuckle. What's wrong with it? Nothing. Not a thing. This is going to prove to be an interesting trip, I said, shaking my head and chuckling. I looked over at her and saw her pouting in the seat, trying hard not to say anything angry back at me. 3 hours and 50 minutes after takeoff, we touched down on the single runway at Crested Butte. I taxied to the general aviation area and shut down the turbines, letting them spool down as I got the stairs down. It only took me a few minutes to walk to the parking area and find the Jeep that was left for me, an old CJ5 that looked like it had seen better days. I drove to the plane and loaded the coolers, my duffel bag and fishing gear into the back along with her 2 big suitcases, and then went about buttoning up the plane for short-term storage, inserting the engine housing plugs and covers to keep birds and other undesirable critters out of the delicate engines. Okay. All aboard, I said as I closed the stairs and turned to walk to the driver's side of the Jeep. I climbed in and looked over at Kim sitting in the somewhat ratty seat, trying to pull her miniskirt down her legs. You may want to put on your seatbelt. Without doors you'd end up on the pavement by the second corner. If you say so, she said, pulling the seatbelt across her lap and clipping it. I chuckled and let the clutch out, quickly turning around and heading out toward Highway 50. Windblown. That's how I would have to describe her by the time I pulled off the highway nearly 20 miles down the road. With no top and no doors, the Jeep was like a convertible on steroids. The wind whipped around the windshield and blew her hair in every possible direction, making it almost impossible for her to see. When I slowed down to turn onto the gravel road leading up the mountain, I could see her frown, but had to admit, she was holding her tongue. I couldn't help but look over at her as we drove up the winding bouncy gravel road. The halter might have covered her large breasts, but it did a horrible job of containing the bouncing mounds, one of her breasts bouncing clear out of the top after a particularly rough jolt. Yeah, it was an interesting outfit. I turned onto the dirt track that led even higher up the mountain, leaving the lodge behind us. The gravel road was smooth as silk compared to the 2 dirt ruts that constituted the road now. I looked over at Kim and actually felt sorry for her. Her short skirt had ridden up her thighs so far I could see the red of her panties beneath, and her tits absolutely refused to stay in the top, both of them now exposed as she held onto the windshield with one hand and the edge of the seat with the other, leaving none free to cover herself back up. I slowed down to bounce over a fallen log and then pulled to a stop in the middle of the road. I shut the engine off and sat back to look at her. "If you want, you can change," I said as she pulled the material of her halter back over her incredibly sexy tits. "No. I'm fine," she said after a few seconds. "I'm not going to disrupt your trip, remember? Afraid I'll throw you into the lake?" "Actually, I am." "Well, I'll make an exception. I promise not to throw you into the lake if you want to change your clothes," I said with a chuckle. "Why? You don't like what I'm wearing?" "Kim, I've flown you to how many photo shoots and catwalks? I doubt there's anything that you can wear that would show more than I've already seen." "Really? Why do you have a hard-on then?" I looked down at my lap and realized she was right. I had a huge hard-on inside my shorts, something I hadn't had looking at her since, well, shortly after I started. Her attractiveness had been completely overridden by her bitchy nasty personality. "Touché," I said. "Just thought I'd offer." "You don't like what you see?" "I didn't say that. You're a multi-million-dollar show-off. Let's face it, you'd look good no matter what you wear." "But you don't want my tits bouncing where you can see 'em?" she asked pointedly. "Kim, I don't care if you want to go naked. There isn't anyone out here to see except me and Mother Nature. So there isn't any point in being a clothes horse. Wear what you want to be comfortable." "That offer to change still stand?" she asked with her brow furrowed slightly. "Still stands," I answered. "Good," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. She stepped out of the Jeep and stood on the grass next to the dirt tracks, wiggling her skirt down over her hips until she could step out of it. She tossed it onto the empty old milk crate I kept wedged between our seats and then reached for the top of her halter, pulling the knot around her neck apart. The material flopped down, exposing her full round tits, each the size of a half melon glued to her chest. Her skin was tanned without a single line and her areola, perfectly round and pink, were clearly puckered around her rock-hard nipples. She finished undoing the tie behind her back and tossed the top on top of the skirt. She bent over and pulled her 4-inch heels off and tossed them onto the pile as well. "There," she said, sliding back onto the seat and starting to buckle her belt back up. "That all? You don't want to take the panties off too?" "If you insist," she said, reaching down and sliding the tiny red thong panty off her ass and down her legs, tossing it into my lap, leaving her completely naked on the passenger seat. "Your turn." "My turn for what?" "To get undressed. It's only fair, right? I mean, you don't expect me to sit here naked all alone, right?" "Why?" I asked, a little startled. "Well, look at it from my perspective. I get ogled all day. Hell, there's dozens of guys that have seen me completely naked, including you. They see me when I'm changing, they see me when I'm being posed for a photo. There isn't a part of me that hasn't been exposed to multiple guys. Once, just once, I'd like turn around to be fair play. If I'm naked, you should be too." I thought about it for a few moments, and without another word, unbuckled my seatbelt. I stepped out of the Jeep and undid the belt on my shorts and pushed them down, stepping out of them and tossing them on the pile between the seats. I took a breath and a little nervously pushed my boxers down, freeing my engorged cock to stick out its full 9 inches at her. I tossed my boxers on the pile and then skimmed off my t-shirt, leaving me naked except for my socks and boots. "Better?" I asked as I slipped into the seat again and buckled the seatbelt, my cock sticking straight up in the air as I pushed the clutch in to start the engine together. "Actually, yeah, it is," she said, still looking at my cock and making me nervous. I shifted into gear and took off up the road again, bouncing our way up the last mile toward the cabin. I pulled into the clearing in front of the lake and stopped, shutting the engine down and letting Mother Nature bathe us in the sound of the breeze blowing through the soft pine boughs and the birds starting to chirp again after our arrival. "Wow. This is, well, incredible," she said, undoing her seatbelt and standing up, holding onto the windshield. She turned to look around, her pussy slightly higher than my face, but only a little more than a foot away, her completely shaved mound and pussy completely exposed as she moved. Her lips were fat and round with only a tiny bit of inner lip peeking out from between them, little bits of moisture glistening between her lips sexily. If my cock had softened any on the remaining drive, the view in front of me ensured that I was once again rock hard. "Yeah, it is," I answered, thinking more about how she looked framed against the sky and trees in front of me than anything else. "You know this wouldn't be a half-bad place if I didn't have to shit in a wooden box," she said as she stared at the little outhouse behind the cabin. "And then it's gone," I muttered. For a few minutes she was acting like a real person. Hell, I'd even felt a little sorry for her having no control over who sees her naked. Stupid of me, I know. I climbed out of the Jeep and started carrying the gear into the small cabin, Kim walking in behind me, seeing the dust and cobwebs that prevailed in the many months of human absence. "Jesus. Doesn't anyone clean around here?" I turned around and looked at her, took 2 steps and picked her thin frame up in my arms and threw her over my shoulder, clamping her kicking legs to my chest as I walked out the cabin door. She struggled and squirmed, twisting in my arms and trying to hit and kick me to put her down all the way to the rickety wooden dock sticking out about 30 feet from shore into the lake. It wasn't the most graceful thing I'd ever done, but the squeal as she hit the cold water was worth the several bruises I was sure were going to pop up for my effort. I walked to the shore and stood there, waiting for her to walk naked from the lake, her hair now laying in a flat mat, water streaming from her hair and body. She walked up the shore staring daggers at me. "Bastard," she muttered. To be continued.